All right, NAIA football fans, this is Corey Thorpe back with another edition of the NAIF Ball Live Show, powered by AdCraft Custom Apparel and Merch, the best in the business since 1974, getting it done on their 50th anniversary. Lots of cool stuff going on there. We apologize for not making it last week on the show. I do apologize. I was on the way back from buying a new truck. I mean, that's that's a fun thing for a guy who's never had really much of a nice car.
Did you guys trade in the Subaru, or is it like an
Yeah.
actual addition to the cars? And you
No,
guys have
we
like two now,
we we
or
uh
three? Sorry.
we gave them the Subaru and look, man, if they would have given me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for that Subaru, I would have taken it.
Yeah, because did you mention with the Subaru? And of course, I know that our listeners are not going to know the full backstory to the
Right.
Subaru, but you got to give them like at least the 60-second summary of your saga with the Subaru.
Holy cow, guys. I've replaced the transmission, the entire air conditioning system, the uh, wheel bearings, the axle. It's been, don't buy a Subaru. But got a little Ford Maverick, little truck, hybrid truck. Loving it so far. So, well, this is not car talk, Angelo. This is flag football here, boys, and we've had a couple of really important games this last week that ranked wins, ranked matchups here. Let's start off with the one that's going to be the biggest, obviously, and that is Ottawa taking the KCAC championship, a 35-14 win over Kansas Wesleyan. Ottawa takes another regular season championship.
It's not surprising, too. I mean, this was a game that was at Ottawa. Again, when your perfect record in program history is on the line at home, you have to come ready to play. And Kansas Wesleyan definitely did give them a run for their money. It was as close as 4 points at one point in the game, but then Ottawa ran away with it in the second half. And when you make plays and when it's time to really buckle down and really make a play and make stops and just make the kind of, you know, plays pretty much to do all this. That's what it really comes down to. So a great regular season finish for Ottawa and great momentum heading into the KCAC tournament.
Yeah, when you go 9 of 10 on third down conversions, that's gonna be tough to overcome if you're the opposing offense. It's that's not conducive to winning football, is allowing 9 of 10 on third down conversions, but absolute credit to Ottawa getting it done. And also, heck, credit to Corinne DeQuee for Kansas Wesleyan. 3 catches, 100 yards, and a touchdown, including a 55-yard grab. And, Angelo, it's an 80-yard field, ain't it?
It is, and I know we've mentioned DeQuee's name a couple of times, even dating back to last year, but
Mhm.
DeQuee is one of those players that, if you get her in the right system, she really is one of those underestimated players. I mean, when you think about receivers in general, there was Marissa Rubino back in the day. Obviously you got Angel Roman, just a few other players. Jada Wilson, another good example as well. But with DeQuee, she's in that list. She should be in that realm of receivers, but you don't hear her name often. But these kind of games that she has, despite the loss, just reaffirms the fact that DeQuee is one of the better receivers in NAIA ball.
Now we go to South Georgia here, Friday afternoon special, and Thomas earns the moniker of the better Thomas as they defeat St. Thomas 26-6. I got to tell you, Angelo, this one was it played right into Thomas's hands. 4 interceptions grabbed by the Thomas defense off of Holly Near, and that's why you see the stats with Alexa. 125 yards on 17 of 27 passing. She didn't have to. The defense gave her short fields. Caitlin Herb, though, man, came to play. 4 pulls, all for loss, 2 sacks, and a pick. That was a hands up in the air, deflect the ball pick, and I want to say that one was a pick 6, if I remember correctly.
It's been a couple of days, partner. You were the one calling the game. You should know what was going on.
Time is an
No, but I mean,
illusion.
like, but in all seriousness, though, I mean, like, this is the reason why Caitlin Herb was picked out, hand selected by Chelsea Palmer during the offseason and during the signing portion. You know, this dual athlete just knows how to shine. And even with talking with Coach Palmer, Herb was going to be one of those players that needed to develop into the rushing role. Again, you look at last season in terms of where Thomas was at from a rushing position, and when Jada Reese left to go to Kansas Wesleyan, there was that big question of who was going to step up and take ownership of that rushing role. And granted, Herb had a little bit of a slow start in the beginning of the season, but games like these, when you're coming into form and things are starting to come together at the right time of the season, you can't ask for anything better as a team. And again, you mentioned it, partner, the stats that Herb put up against a potent St. Thomas offense. That speaks volumes. And again, not very often do you hear of a rusher getting an interception. It's always been pulls and sacks, but to have a pick in the mix, that's got to be extra special for the freshman.
I will also make the point here, and this is not we usually do not talk special teams. There is all of one special teams play in flag football, and that's punt. Caitlin Herb punting has been incredibly special. She has punted 5 times, mind you, for an average of 37.2 with a long of 45. Angelo, that's going to be in the top third of male NAIA punters.
Like even in terms of just, reminiscing about her stats, it kind of reminds me of, while we're talking about her at the quarterback position, but Holly Neer, if you think about where she was at in her second or third year, she was putting up similar numbers as a punter. And although it's not generally the same as a couple of years ago, if you find the right coffin corner punter, and of course I'm using football general terminology from a tackle football standpoint, but this is an answered prayer if you even want to talk about with Thomas, because before finding Herb, they were using Kiana Acole as a punter. And granted, Acole did what she could, but still, you can't tell me there weren't a few times for Thomas where they wished the punt would have gone a little bit further, perhaps on average getting close to 40, 45 yards. They had to have been methodical before the Herb era, but now with Herb in the mix, she's really she's really taking ownership, and she's now filled a couple of different spots for Thomas that were lacking from a special teams and defensive standpoint.
Yeah, trying to look, but I can't find right off the bat what the punting looked like for here we go, average. Okay. So Herb's 37.2 would put her at 38th in the male NAIA football. That's
half the field, essentially.
No, no, there are 100 teams. That is top third. That's obscene. But of course, the big stat between St. Thomas and Thomas getting into the red zone 5 times. 2, being 3 of 5 when they were there. Getting it done. There's no field goals in flag. You can't just bail out and take 3 points. You get 6 or you get nothing. And to limit St. Thomas to 0 of 2, keep them outside of the red zone, and getting in 5 times and giving yourself 3 scores there in the red zone, that's a big deal for the Nighthawks going into the final regular season week and starting to prep for conference championship week.
And again, to reiterate, you want to make sure you're peaking at the right time as a team in the season. And usually you want to see that in effect where it's near the end of the season where you're starting to get into postseason play, like you're mentioning. You never want to be at the very top and then peaking too early, and then you head into championship portion, and then all of a sudden there's question marks that happen if you start to get a little bit of a slump, because once you hit postseason play, especially when you go into the NAIA tournament, you're basically credited with one, possibly two losses if it's a double elimination tournament, and you have to basically learn on the fly, and you really have no room to grow and reflect. That's what part of the regular season is all about when you're developing together as a team. And mind you, Corey, when we talked with Coach Palmer, she said to us at the beginning of this season that she wasn't exactly sure how things were going to shape out, how things were going to turn out for the team. Yes, the expectation was to still be in the elite group, but with a lot of moving pieces and a lot of younger players that are trying to fill in these roles, they're starting to come on their own. They're starting to see the pieces come together. And since the Reinhardt tournament, we have really seen an offensive boom from Thomas. Because remember, with Alexa Wilson and the way she was playing, there wasn't anything too detrimental, but some experts could have theoretically questioned if she was the franchise quarterback for Thomas. And as of the last 3-4 games, she's really made a strong statement that she is the queen general. And when it comes to the flag football pitch, I mean, like, this is what you need. You need the right pieces in place, the right motivation, the right tools, the everything clicking and gelling together. And Thomas has done that overall, but with Wilson in particular, there's a reason why she was the reigning Sun Conference Player of the Week and putting up the numbers that she did when they were in Kentucky and Campbellsville. And this is just a reflection moving forward from what she continues to do. And hopefully she will continue to see that growth, and the Nighthawks will continue to benefit from that. But one other point I did want to make in regards to back to the 3 for 5, this was a St. Thomas defense that was a vaunted defense.
It was good
So
defense. Now, I will say, they were missing a key player in that defense, and that would be Tashumba Washington. They had no Tashumba Washington, but still.
to that point, yes, with Tashumba, that was a huge loss for the Bobcats. But at the same time, with some of the other players in the mix, that's where there still has to be some form of cohesion, some sort of just shutting them down. But, to that point, Thomas had the right advantage. They had the right momentum as well. Because mind you, these games, if everybody's full strength, we're looking at a maximum of 2 scores, maybe on both sides. Maybe one team gets 3 scores. But either way, despite the disadvantage St. Thomas had in this game, Thomas needed this win over St. Thomas, and it really bolsters their standings when you look at the overall NAIA picture.
Yep, so let's take a look at how that does impact the overall NAIA picture. And we might get a few DMs over this poll, Angelo.
We love DMs. We love to chat about what they think and what people consider in terms of the polls and how things are spread out. But here we are.
We might get some DMs on this one. Had the full slate this week. Kaiser maintains their effective stranglehold on first place. 6 first place votes out of 8 overall pollsters. But take a look at numbers 5 and 6. Yeah.
I mean, it really comes down to not just from our numbers, but the ultimate argument here is if Kansas Wesleyan is above Ottawa, is it because of the record overall, or is it because they've beaten Ottawa and it's a split series? Because if you mention that Ottawa has taken away the KCAC title for the 4th time, then this really doesn't make any sense, because despite the records and despite, even if you want to throw in the quality of teams that are being played, it's a split series. I mean, even if you want to say Ottawa won the first meeting and then Kansas Wesleyan wins the second meeting, it's there's a lot of arguments that could be made in this case. And I mean, personally, you know, I would have said Ottawa should be number 5 and Kansas
Yeah.
Wesleyan should be 6, despite the number of losses and stuff. But again, it goes back to the scheduling and the quality of schedule. Kansas Wesleyan, in their case, had a weaker schedule than Ottawa did this
Yep.
season. And Ottawa again is looking to play the best of the best, despite the slump that they had in the regular or in the spring portion at the Reinhardt tournament. They still were able to bounce back. They still have been able to keep somewhat consistent. But outside of that, the top 4 seems to be right. Obviously with Thomas's win, they rightfully should be in that top 3 discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the only gripe I've got. Now, granted, just like we had a few weeks back where we had St. Thomas ahead of Thomas by 1 point, the gap between Kansas Wesleyan and Ottawa is a 1 point difference. So it is close there between the two, but I would tend to agree with you, Angelo, that the body of work and the quality of opponent at this point should give Ottawa the advantage. The only teams that Ottawa has lost to are numbers 1, 2, 3, or 1, 3, 4, and 5 in this poll. Kansas Wesleyan has lost to a Midland team who is 9-5 and has had several losses that should not have occurred for a team that is looking to do to be third in the KCAC. Losses a couple weeks ago, they lost to Southwestern. They've lost early in the season. They lost to, of course, Kansas Wesleyan. They lost to Ottawa twice, and I wanted to say they lost to someone else as well. That was a shouldn't have done, but yeah. But I think that'll right itself. We'll get back to it, of course, after the after championship weeks roll out. I think you're going to see those possibly flip there. But we'll be back after these messages from our friends at AdCraft.
So you want to create and sell custom merch for your team or business. That's exciting, but where do you begin? How much inventory should you order? How do you distribute orders? AdCraft has your answers. Streamline the way you offer custom merch by utilizing our risk-free web store service. We ship directly to each customer, and we have the fastest turnaround in the game. Raise funds for your team or get merch to your employees and patrons. Contact AdCraft today, and let's bring your merch to life.
Absolutely what they do, and they do it very, very well there. So give them a call today, whether it's for your business or whether it's for your team on the field, getting your merch into the hands of your fans, shipped right to their doorstep. There's no better way to go than AdCraft. So we've got, of course, several big games this week. Of course, the KCAC tournament is coming up. We have not seen yet a bracket out of the KCAC. We will see what that looks like. Hopefully, they'll get it out fairly soon, as tournaments this weekend.
Do you think it may be because they're trying to determine the seedings and tiebreakers at this point in time? Because I know you mentioned that Ottawa won the title, but technically, in terms of the records, do we know for certain, based off the tiebreakers, that Ottawa won that one and was claimed the number 1 seed, or is it a co-championship
No,
between Ottawa and Kansas Wesleyan.
this is straight. Ottawa is 11-1 in the KCAC. Kansas Wesleyan is 12-2. So it is pretty clear cut. Actually, the whole thing is pretty clear all the way down. Baker is 3 at an 8-4 KCAC record. Midland is 4th at 9-5. Southwestern 5th at 5-7. Cotty 6th at 5-10. St. Mary 7th. Numbers are hard at 2-11, and then Graceland and Bethel at 8-9. I'm not 100% certain if they are going to play, since most of their games down the stretch have been canceled for those two squads. I think it's pretty cut and dry in terms of the seeding.
Well, that's why too, like especially with the KCAC when they have, or the KCAC when they have different number of games.
Yeah.
That's why you have the conference percentage system, because if you have a team again that's 11-1 and then you have another team that's 12-2, one could argue, why does one team get more conference games than another? But at the end of the day, with the conference percentage, that's the best way for the conference office to determine what the better record is overall and what's going to, put everything in order. And so, that's always a challenge for most teams, or even just fans in general, to accept, which is why ideally you want to have a round robin setup with most of your conferences, or at the very least, if you have a whole bunch of teams, create divisions, create, sub pods, and depending on how you want to put up the schedule, that'll be a little bit easier to maintain. Now, granted, again, you got teams that have canceled games in the KCAC.
That's your problem.
But you have to find a way to balance that out, and it's not always easy. I'm not going to say that every conference should know how to adjust to that, but you have to find a way to still make sure it's somewhat even across the plays.
It's super hard. I mean, Cotty played one game out of conference. According to the website, every game against a KCAC opponent was a conference game. So there weren't any of these, well, I'll play you once as a conference matchup, and then every other time we play, it's a non-con. So you've got teams that played 15 conference games, and then you've got a team that's played 3. So that makes it super difficult. And I almost wonder if the KCAC is trying to figure out if, are Graceland and Bethel going to participate? Do you cap it at, 6 teams and cut off at Cotty? It's a 2-day tournament, so we'll see. Nothing has been announced yet. All we have is kind of the artifacts on folks' websites that it's going to be the 20th and 21st. And Kansas Wesleyan has it at the Paragon Star in Lee Summit, Missouri. That's about all we know at this juncture. Hurts me to say, but that's what we know, and we'll let you know when we know more. Because yeah.
Imagine if Graceland was 3-0 and then they had all those games forfeited. Wouldn't they technically have won the KCAC? If you think about Kansas Wesleyan, Ottawa, 11-1, 12-2, but then if you only just play 3 games, you win all 3, and then there's cancellations. It's like you're unbeaten in the conference. Does that count, or do they take other factors into consideration, like you need to play a minimum number of conference games in order to qualify?
That sounds like Florida State in that COVID year where we had COVID for Florida and Clemson. May or may not have occurred. It was a weird year. But the other big game this week is going to decide where the Sun Conference tournament is going to be held. We know for sure that it's going to be in the state of Florida. What we don't know is whether it's going to be Lake Wales or West Palm Beach. This is going to be a fun game. We've been having this debate all season on Kaiser versus Warner. We've been debating it. Warner had that month off. Kaiser played through, kind of started late. I don't know. I don't know. Now, Warner did have a close matchup against Weber. It was a 14-12 game there. Whereas Kaiser, find that matchup there, gets to play Weber afterwards. So we don't know how they match up against Weber. It's going to be an interesting game. All you can do right now is compare common opponents, honestly.
Cory, date back to early February at the turn of that month.
Mm-hmm.
Would you have thought in your wildest dreams, with all the polls that came out, with all the predictions that were made, that it would have came down to this game in particular to win the Sun Conference title? I mean, it's no surprise that Kaiser's in it, but again, with the season that Warner's had, not one loss, with all the games that, or even just opponents that they've played, they found a way to win games. And some, mind you, were very convincing wins. Like, this team deserves to be at the very top of the league. But in terms of the system and everything else, would you have thought in your wildest dreams that with this matchup in Lake Wales that there is a serious chance of them hosting a conference championship?
Hey, look, when they beat Thomas after Thomas schlobberknocked Weber, that's when I remember I sent you that text and I went, Warner might be where it's at this year.
And honestly, Cory, I think what's even more impressive about this squad for Warner, this is a team that, again, nobody looked at or may have looked at as maybe they could crack the top six. Maybe, they might have an opportunity. But there's always that comparison with their Lake Wales, Babson Park rival, Weber or Warner, Weber or Warner. And, I'll admit it here on our podcast that I've always taken Weber most of the time because I thought Warner is just a team that, is still trying to find their rhythm, their groove. But you look at how they played last season in Atlanta, and then you compare this season. And mind you, there's no more Madison Tingen under center. Cynthia Holmes is at Ottawa. That two names alone, just it tells you would think that those would be your go-to primary players when it comes to Warner and leading a championship. I don't know about you, Cory, but I can't think of one player's name on Warner's roster that is an individual playmaker or is one of these players that you hear of, like a Kennedy Foster or, a Jazz Roden or, a Brianna Hernandez Silva, just to name a few on Kaiser. Because Kaiser, you can name 4, 5, maybe even 6 players that stand out just by making an impact individually. But with Warner, it is an absolute team effort the way that they're playing over there. A true flag football system that's being incorporated down there in Lake Wales.
Yeah, you're not wrong at all. I mean, looking back through it, I'm like, holy cow, I think you're right. And that's probably what they've bought into. We'll take Destiny Burrows and Anna Vincenzini. I'll take that. I mean, they're not.
They're not players that make strong, convincing arguments if
Right.
you're going to do something as simple as who should be the Sun Conference Player of the Week. Maybe
Right.
defensively there's a better chance, but offensively, with all the offensive playmakers in the Sun Conference, it's tough to pinpoint who on the offensive end for Warner can compete at that level that those players do. But at the end of the day, it's about how many wins you can get and what the overall result is versus individual players, padding stats, etc. So, again, give credit to Tim Mims. And I'm telling you right now, Cory, I will be stunned, and I may need to talk with Commissioner Dustin Wilkie if Tim Mims does not come away as the 2024 Sun Conference Coach of the Year.
Oh, he should. He should walk away with it. It should be, without a doubt, he should win unanimously.
Because, to be fair, for our Kaiser listeners out there, Sam Harris done a heck of a job for Kaiser.
Mm-hmm.
She's been in the system, yes, for those that are going against the argument for Kaiser, for Harris to be Coach of the Year. But at the same time, she assumed the role that became vacant literally days before the season started as Coach Hilliker went on to Lenore Ryan. But with Harris and what she had to do at that interim spot to still keep things going. Now, granted, yes, they found a solid coordinator that has really helped things out this season. But at the same time, in terms of her experience, she really didn't have head coaching experience. She may have done some volunteer help at a high school level, but with what she had in place and what she did, I mean, that's something to be commended. But at the end of the day,
She had some
that was
dudes.
the expectation for Kaiser. They
Right.
were expected to be at the level that they were right now versus Warner, who finished with the second worst Sun Conference record last year and now can finish no worse than second in the regular season and possibly may have a chance to win the title on Saturday or on Thursday. So, all in all, I hope the coaches, if you're listening, Sun Conference coaches, you got to admit that what Tim has done, what Coach Mims has done, has been absolutely special. No play, again, no Madison Tingen, no Cynthia Holmes, and they are in part of that driver's seat to potentially take away the 2024 regular season title.
Now let's take a look at your top 6 common opponents. This is really interesting. So February 16th, Warner defeats Thomas 13-7, a 6-point win. March 23rd, Kaiser defeats Thomas 6-0, 6-point win. February 23rd, Warner defeats St. Thomas University 12-0. On April 6th, Kaiser University defeats St. Thomas University 25-13, a 12-point win. Look, you couldn't put this matchup any closer if you put their names on opposite sides of the same sheet of paper.
To be fair, though, I mean, if you're mentioning just two opponents, though, some could say that that's coincidence. But to your point, though, again, Thomas and St. Thomas, two strong teams in NAIA football in general, not just in the Sun Conference. When you're winning by 2 scores, I mean, that's something you don't just look over easily. I mean, like, that's something that is worth mentioning. And again, to that point, Warner, undefeated season, Kaiser, undefeated season. But at the same time, you also look at the overall opponents that they played. Kaiser has played quality opponents. They played pretty much everybody but Kansas Wesleyan in that top 6 rankings. Warner has played their respective share of Sun Conference opponents, but no Kansas Wesleyan, no Ottawa. It's been basically any teams that are above average and whoever's in the Sun Conference. So, this is one of those games where it's easy to say Kaiser is a heavy favorite, but do not count this Warner Royals team out by any means because, again, this is a team that has won games through a team effort. It doesn't matter how pretty or ugly it's been this season, they have found ways to get a W at the end of the day. And I wouldn't want to bet against Warner at any point at this point in time in the season. But at the same time, with all those wins, the question does lie. Have we seen Warner reached their peak, or have we yet to see them take it to another level?
That is
As
really
we
the
head towards
question.
postseason.
That's really the question is, did they peak early and beat St. Thomas and Thomas? Or do they still have some growth to go? I don't know the answer to that. But all I know is that whoever wins this game, barring something unforeseen where Kaiser loses to Weber, in a few days after. And heck, they'd still have the tiebreaker on Warner. So, yeah, whoever wins this game wins the Sun in the regular season and hosts the Sun Conference tournament.
As long as there's no thunderstorms in Lake Wales on Thursday, I think the Seahawks should be ready to go.
Seahawks and thunderstorms just don't get along too well. Something about
it's been like an
birds.
Achilles heel.
I know, dude. It's crazy. They're going to get tired of us mentioning that at some point. So,
well, good news is in Atlanta, they play in a dome, so it shouldn't matter. As long as they're not playing in the Home Depot backyard.
That's a fair point. Now, also to be fair, if you play them any out of the Marietta Park there, they'll play them in the rain, dadgummit. We know about that.
Yeah, just make sure it's a first-round game for them because
Right.
I don't think that it shouldn't be like last year where in the rain they ended up meeting a more powerful Ottawa team in a winter semifinal bracket and they had to play that game. So I think with Kaiser where they are right now, it would be a very hard argument to place them any lower than number 2 overall if we were looking at the NAIA Flag Finals seedings.
Oh, yeah.
Heading into Atlanta next month.
100%. Now, we do have a little bit of news here. Yeah, we pass on whatever we hear. And Angelo, you had sort of alluded around it earlier, but I was able to confirm with a coach this week that the tournament is going to be back to pool play. No double elimination this year. And with that, not everyone's getting into the tournament this year. We're going to, unfortunately, going to have to leave some teams out. It'll be interesting to see how they play it.
So it's just pool play, but it's yet to be determined how many teams that they're going to put in pool. Because I'm thinking if it's pool play, it's got to be either 12 or if they're that generous, maybe 16 teams. But I highly doubt they're going to go as high as 16.
Yeah,
I mean, the most teams that they've ever had was 12 teams. And even in double elimination last year, it looked like it was going to be 12 teams before a few teams had to drop out at the last second. So if I had to guess right now in terms of pool play, they may go back to a compass bracket settings where, again, you're assigned games based off your pool, but whichever 2 teams win their first games, those are the teams that play each other in the second game. And the teams that have lost will play each other as their second game. But that would more or less come to an argument of what are the knockout stages are going to look like? Are we going to see another silver and gold bracket, or do they have another knockout stage in mind, single elimination, or however they want to do the seedings?
All I'm saying, Angelo, point differential. Point differential should be your tiebreaker. I know it encourages people to run up the score.
Is that confirmed, though?
No. I am making my case for point differential. And I think who was it? Was it Warner or Weber that would highly agree with me that point differential is the way to go? Who was it like 3 years ago?
Well, because the reason I ask about this again was, and again, this is more or less allegedly because you and I were not in that coach's call when they were speaking with RCX and NAIA Flag, that certain requirements, certain tiebreakers were going to be seen if there was a situation where teams were tied at 1-1, or if they won both of their games and it was tied at point differential, who would get the tiebreaker, and what that official number was going to be, whether it was a point differentials or more of whoever allowed the fewest amount of points. Now, allegedly, most of the coaches were under the impression it was about the fewest amount of points that were allowed, rather than it being a point differential. So there was controversy in the 2022 NAIA Flag Football Finals, which was why Ottawa got the tiebreaker over Kaiser with the number 2 spot, despite them entering the tournament as the number 3 overall seed. So, again, if I'm one of the coaches, I would be double checking and triple checking
Mm-hmm.
with RCX and NAIA flag that if this is how we're going to do it, make sure everybody knows across the board and don't wait till the final game to say, we're doing it this way, and there isn't that confirmation. You got to be clear cut from a tournament director standpoint. You have to be clear cut, and you can't leave any room for interpretation. It's got to be clear cut, black and white. If this happens, then this happens. If this happens, then this happens. Even in our conference office in the NCAA realm, you got to have these tiebreakers in place. You can't leave it to something as you can't leave it to chance like a coin flip. It's got to be, certain things down the line.
Yep. And now I would rather go away from the compass. I wasn't a huge fan of that. Just play the other 3 teams in your bracket. It'll be fine. Or the other 4 teams, or the other 2 teams in your bracket. They do like 4 threes. And just run that way. That way you're not going, oh well, they played X and Y, but they only played Z and Alpha. If everyone plays everyone else in their pool, we'll be fine. There will be no questions.
As long as the pool consists of a minimum of 4 teams, we should be good. I've never been a fan of pool plays where it's 3 teams and everybody plays each other for the 2 games because there's always a possibility of every team finishing 1-1, and that causes a huge headache in terms of where do teams place, how do you determine of all 3 1-1 teams who finished first, second, and third in their respective pools, and if it's like FIFA style where you have to have a designated first place team from one pool and a designated second place team. And, that is its own little headache that you have to resolve. And depending on what the setup is like, let's say you have more than 3 pool teams or, 3 pool categories. And let's say hypothetically you have a division that's, and I'm just throwing team names out there, but let's say you have a pool that's strictly Baker, Southwestern, and Weber. You know, in a pool like that, to me, it would be realistic that all those teams could go 1-1, where one team beats up on
100%.
another team, which beats up on another team, and it's all just rotational wins for them. So, you gotta. There's possibilities to that, but from a tournament director standpoint, with pool play, it's exciting to hear that they're returning to that format because now you got teams that will be guaranteed a certain set of games.
Yeah.
They can focus the preliminaries on getting prepared for the knockout stages instead of coming in and maybe losing both games, drop out, and they're done after one day. The pool play, at least if I'm looking at this correctly, will guarantee that it's just more than a day trip for these participating teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think 12 would be fine. That way you would give 2 teams buys in your knockout round. And I think that would be, I could see that being reasonable if you, oh man, if you have 12 and you do 4 threes, or wait, no, 3 fours, you would come.
Yeah, you had it right, 3 fours.
Yeah, 3 fours. Your top 3 teams would be Kaiser Warner Thomas. Like, there's no other way around it.
It is possible, but if you're thinking about it the way I think you're thinking about it, if you're thinking it's going to be the snakes and ladders form where it's the number 1 projected team, number 2 projected team, and then third, and then the 4th place or the number 4 projected team is in the same pool as the number 3, there could be a chance for the number 4 team to win. And so right now, as it stood, if the season were to end right now, you'd be looking at Thomas and St. Thomas in the same pool.
Yeah.
Now, granted, Thomas has had the upper hand against the Bobcats for a little while now, but St. Thomas has been known to come away and upset some teams and have a late season spark in May post Sun Conference tournament. So I wouldn't put it past them. But then if they were also doing it based off your rankings, we'd be also looking at a Warner and Kansas Wesleyan pool base too. And again, Warner, undefeated. Kansas Wesleyan, strong record, but they have not played teams from the Sun Conference as yet. So it's tough to argue if it would be Kaiser, Warner, and Thomas that finishes as those top three teams. And then, mind you, again, Ottawa in the mix. They've been known to hit it at the right time. And if you have them and Kaiser in the mix, because remember, Corey,
Good grief.
Kaiser only got their second win ever against the Braves, and that was when Ottawa was really struggling. That was the second time they've only beaten them. So, again, I'm just throwing out all the
Yeah.
hypotheticals here, but at the same time, I think this time, for the first time in a while, we may have ourselves a really exciting pool groups, for want of a better word, for all these teams. And just to see how it plays out, I'm going to be excited to see how it all turns out at the end of the conference tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, if Kaiser were to win, and I'm just spitballing at this point, just going after the top 6, going by record, you would be looking at Kaiser. Ottawa probably becomes, if let's assume Ottawa wins the conference tournament, the KCAC conference tournament. That would lock them at 5.
Without question.
So you've got Kaiser, K-Dub, Baker, and Milligan.
Or, Corey, or if Ottawa wins the KCAC,
No,
unless if St. Thomas somehow wins the Sun Conference tournament,
no.
St. Thomas would be at 5 losses, but because Ottawa has had a winning streak, I know where you're going with
Head to
this.
head.
Ideally, St. Thomas, regardless, should be above Ottawa. I agree 100% on that. But remember, RCX and NFL Flag have been known to play a little bit of favorites in the past 2 years in terms of
Ooh.
determining some other things besides just the record, in terms of the quality of teams and how they fare out, just like the CFP committee piece. So all I'm saying with that is I wouldn't put it past them if Ottawa wins the KCAC tournament and St. Thomas doesn't make it to at least the Sun Conference Championship, that there might be a little bit of a debate about, Ottawa has done better as of recent, but when they played St. Thomas, they weren't at their best. But St. Thomas, at that point, would have had 5 losses. Ottawa would have only had 4. So do we consider, unless if they have identical records, even if you want to say the argument, like let's say Ottawa didn't have 4 losses, but even let's say if they just had 3 losses and they didn't drop one to Kansas Wesleyan. At that point, if Ottawa wins the KCAC tournament and they had those 3 losses and St. Thomas was still where they were at, which would have put them on track for 5 total losses on the season, would you still put St. Thomas above Ottawa?
St. Thomas there's no way for St. Thomas to have 5 losses by that point. They are a 3-loss team. They have a non-countable loss.
You're right. You're absolutely right. I totally forgot about that one.
Yep, that is a non-countable loss. So we do not on this program. We do not on this program say that non-countable games, unlike other people possibly here around the Tallahassee metro area. We do not count non-countable games. So you would have a St. Thomas team with 4 losses. Now, could you still make the point? Yeah, you could. And that sets up yet another Thomas-Ottawa matchup. And that might be a little too good for RCX to give up.
Well, if you even think about at one point in the regular season, there was a situation where Thomas was ranked number 4 and Ottawa was ranked number 5. Had the season had ended right there and we were heading into Atlanta. It still boggles my mind. Like I still can't fathom a Thomas and Ottawa meeting in a quarterfinal matchup.
Heck,
And
they'd
again,
be
that
in
was
pool
assuming
play.
more or less if you had like the top 8 teams and everybody would have been reseeded accordingly. And there was that scenario where Thomas would have been 4 and Ottawa would have been 5
Yeah.
just after their slump at Reinhardt. I
Yeah.
mean, you don't think of Thomas and Ottawa meeting that early in a tournament bracket.
No, not at all. Let's see. Then you'd have like Warner, Ottawa, Weber, and like Southwestern kind of idea. That might be smoothish sailing. Then yeah.
Well, one could argue in that big difference because remember Campbellsville, you also can't forget about them at 5-4 right now, and then you got Southwestern who's at 5-7. It's still looking at the record
5-5 actually.
that's
I got the final off of that game. Campbellsville lost to Fort Lauderdale.
yeah. So
Which is a countable game.
right, but it's a tough loss for Campbellsville as well, and it's not going to be a good reflection overall in terms of where they can overall place from a seeding standpoint and where they would end up heading into Atlanta.
No, and it's really terrible for Milligan as well, who is 0-3 against Campbellsville this year. A little bit of a slap for them as well, but we'll have to see. KCAC Conference Championship Week. It's not in. It's going to be in Missouri, so it's going to be in nobody's backyard. So no home cooking, no Kansas City barbecue home cooking. And
have they confirmed if they're going to be playing the championship game in Arrowhead again?
They have not. But both days on K-Dub's schedule are in Lee's Summit, which I got to tell you, I have no idea where Missouri Lee's Summit is. It could be right outside of Kansas City. I don't know. I have no idea. It is outside of Kansas City, but it's on the southwest side. So
could you imagine if they decided with all the connections that they had over there, one year it's Arrowhead and then the other year, let's make use of Edward Jones Dome. And so in addition to the St. Louis Battlehawks, you got the KCAC championship and a dome. I mean, like you want to talk about the ideal scenario for the KCAC. Because again, not only do you make headlines by putting a tournament over there, but that's beautiful. That's excellent practice for the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which is being played in a dome. And nobody ever plays in a dome in flag football, at least as yet.
Nope. That would be a good option. And I mean, and there's nobody in the NAI that's got a dome. There are no dome stadiums in the NAIA. So it's not like you could even go like to Missouri Baptist or something, or even like an Evangel or someone like that that's right outside of Kansas City, or Southwestern that's right there near Kansas City. Heck, Ottawa is right outside of Kansas City.
If there was a current NAIA flag football team which current NAIA flag football team do you think would most likely be the first team to get a dome if it ever came to that?
Kaiser.
You think Kaiser?
There's no doubt in my mind. There's enough money rolling through Kaiser right now that they put in look, man. You just won a national championship in conventional football. You've got you're good with everyone. The president's on board. If it's anyone, it's Kaiser.
But you got to remember, part of the pull for Kaiser is you're playing at West Palm Beach. You're going to be right at the beaches. You want to get that sunshine, especially if you're bringing in students that are from the north, the New Jersey, the New Yorkers. They want to experience that sun. To go from the north to the south and then you're playing in a dome settings is like that's not why they want to come to Florida. That's
No
not why they
one.
came to Kaiser. They came down because it's Florida, it's the Sunshine State. They want to go to the beaches, they want to get a tan, they want to live that life. I mean, like, that's the pull for them.
Yeah, St.
I see where you're
Thomas.
coming from, and it is viable. You know, Kaiser would have the money to do it, but
Yeah,
if they were to suddenly build a dome, you know, you also have to think about if St. Thomas, if they had a little more money, would they be going in that same direction?
they could, but they remember they just started football less than 10 years ago, and they're still actually kind of putting their stadium together. They don't have visitor seats yet. They're working on it, but there's no visitor seats yet. So they're still sort of putting theirs together. I don't know Ottawa's financial situation, but no one else on this list has the resources that I'm aware of to go do that. Um, Not even Kansas Wesleyan, which you would think a team in a quite large city in Kansas. How big is Salina? Anyway, I have no idea. Salina is 47,000. Yeah, that's big for Kansas. That's not even Kansas Wesleyan. I really don't think KW would have the means to do that. Might William Woods. Where's William Woods? Fulton, Missouri. Angelo, where the crap is Fulton?
Did you say Ferguson, Missouri?
Fulton, Missouri.
As far as I know, the only Fulton I know is in Georgia, Fulton County.
That is smack dab. If you measured between Kansas City and St. Louis on I-70, William Woods is almost exactly in the middle of I-70. We'll see because they're throwing in and they're throwing down hard into football and flag. Who knows? They might be able to. But yeah, if Ottawa of Arizona ever did it, they'd have. I'm sure they would find some way to dome it up.
Yeah, especially in that heat and being
Yeah.
down in Surprise, Arizona. I mean, like, obviously, Arizona in a desert state is going to be hot to begin with. But as of recent, they've mentioned that Surprise, Arizona is one of the hotter, if not the hottest city in that state. So it's one of those things where if you want to keep them cool, you know, a dome makes perfect sense.
But it does ruin your advantage when you're bringing in teams from Lord knows where and it's 120 degrees. It does really
I'm
ruin
pretty
it.
sure if once the GSAC gets to that point where they sponsor flag football as a conference, then it'll just be like playing in California or playing, you know, up in North area and just, you know,
Do you think
I
it'd
was going to say
be?
Santa Monica, but I keep forgetting that West Vaughn is now with Division Two in the NCAA.
Do you think that it would be the GSAC or do you think it would be the Sooner, which is Ottawa of Arizona's football conference?
I mean, that's a good point too, because the other piece is with the GSAC, you know, we're starting to see more and more schools migrate towards the Pac West for NCAA Division Two.
Yeah.
So as a result, the GSAC is starting to experience the loss of teams and good teams, mind you, because when Westmont was in there, when you had William Jessup in the
Yeah.
mix, you know, that the GSAC had some prominence. Just just talking about a conference as a general, you know, let alone any other specific sport. But I think with the Sooner Athletic Conference, it ultimately depends on how big flag football becomes in the Midwest. Because outside of Ottawa and Kansas, there really hasn't been a big boom of flag football, and of course Kansas Wesleyan to add to that mix as well. You know, you'd be talking about having the city in Midland rallying around the Warriors, and it doesn't matter what they do, but they would just be like Ottawa's fans traveling in flocks to Georgia to cheer on the Braves when it comes to the NAIA national tournament. You know, there has to be true following of a team, of a passion piece. And, from what I've seen, Corey, I don't know if there's been a strong fan base like that outside of Ottawa and Kansas Wesleyan.
We'll have to see because, I mean, you think about like Texas, like the state of Texas, football crazy Texas. If they haven't started up flag football in earnest yet, I bet they will very soon. So you're going to see teams like Tex West, um, the college that is soon to be formally known as SAGU. That's going to I have to learn their new name. Um, yeah, I'm gonna have to learn that before September. It's gonna drive me crazy. Um, yeah, like a Louisiana Christian in Pineville, Louisiana.
See, when you're mentioning teams like that, Corey, I can't help but think maybe we could be seeing the Red River Athletic Conference potentially getting on board with flag football.
All those are sooner in football because Red River does not have a football is not a football conference.
Right. And even though they're not necessarily a football conference, it doesn't necessarily mean that they may start to bring in flag football as a preview or a transition piece into football.
Now there might be some that aren't able to. I know like with take AUM, Auburn University Montgomery, the Alabama University system says that AUM cannot play football at any level because they don't want it competing with Auburn. And so you've got LSUA and LSUS in the Red River that may not be able to play football in any form.
That's a true point. I mean it's a good piece to think about in that regard. But then you have to think about maybe some of the other schools that are part of that LSU system, for example. I can't remember if Xavier University is private or public, but let's say
Private.
hypothetically if they were part of the LSU system, but because of the way that their system is and this name of the school, it's like nobody would think they were part of the system. But then if you do your research and if you do your due diligence, it's you find out yes, although they don't have a name that resembles Auburn, like Auburn Montgomery or LSU for Shreveport and Alexandria, they're still part of the system. Like, and I'm just using a Division II example, but Angelo State, nobody would know that that's a Texas Tech University school system. Angelo State is actually public; they're not private. And to that point, West Texas A&M is part of the Texas A&M system,
Sure.
but people could pick up on that because of the A&M. But there's other schools that, even when Tarleton State was Division II before they moved up to Division I, they were also part of the Texas A&M system, despite them not having Texas A&M in their university title.
Well, Zula is they're an oddity. They are a historically black Catholic university, which I have a hard time wrapping my head around. But what I don't have
Still waiting for Zula to restart their flag football program, by the way.
as a varsity squad, no less. Um, hey, the HBCU conference might bring it on the new name for the GCAC starting next year. You never know. That'd be fun for like those teams over there to start that up, like Rust and all those guys over there.
It ultimately will depend on the commissioner that's running it because, I mean, like, I know she's had some visions in terms of how she wants to see the conference grow and develop. But I mean, again, it's flag football has been a hot, popular topic in just about every
Yep.
association level, NAIA, NCAA, you name it. But I don't know if every single conference commissioner is still on board with it yet. I mean, it ultimately depends, again, on what their vision is, what their path, and how they want to see the conference grow. So it could be something for the HBCU conference to look into. I mean, obviously, you look at the benefits, it helps. It's an inexpensive sport to start up. But again, you'd have to talk with the fellow presidents, the athletic directors of each school, and they would have to mull it over, and there has to be enough teams that would be able to sponsor it in order for it to be a sponsored sanctioned sport from a conference level?
Well, Angelo, the folks that sanction and sponsor us are my favorite, and that is our patrons. They are the best. Keep us floating over here and doing fine. If you want to join in and help support flag football coverage, and also conventional football coverage at this level, give us a look over at patreon.com/NAIAFBALL. It's pretty inexpensive. It's $1 a month to support what we do. And our patrons are DSU Cone, Bob Boone, Roger Meyer, Jeremy Vobble, Shirley Labella, Fred Christensen, Jerry Quickle, Ace Wellen, Shirley, let's see, no, wait, I lost my place. Brett, Marty Seabolt, Nick Ryan, Hayden Frigno, Kyle Gregory, Tyler Pierce, Justin Hoffman, Steve Speakman, Brian Shake, Julianne Shager, Nate Soapbeer, Stephen Cutler, Julie Loud, Dale Norton, Nathan Moore, Dylan Gonzalez, Ryan, Jason Crawford, Dustin Wilkie, Charles A. Flowers, Todd Nick, Sean Chamberlain, Debbie, Zach, Lance, and Josue Trujillo. And that is the list. I really want to be more out of breath, honestly, when reading those. I need more names to get me out of breath. But looks like there's no comments in the stream. We will see y'all again next week. We'll be reviewing the KCAC tournament, and hopefully we might have some. Hopefully, I mean, the national tournament's only like 3 weeks away. By next week, it's 2 weeks away. Hopefully, we might have a bracket out for you. Maybe not any teams in it, but we might have a bracket for you. So
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Looking forward to it. So for the man, the myth, the legend, Angelo Pontello, I'm Corey Thorpe, and we'll see y'all next week. I can't believe we went an hour.